Anxiety is a very common experience for people on the autism spectrum. And although anxiety is not part of the diagnostic criteria for ASD, it significantly impacts their lives. And we have 6 reasons for this: social challenges, sensory sensitivities, monotropic focus, alexithymia, genetic factors, and environmental factors. We'll look at each of these in turn. Social challenges. People on the autism spectrum often struggle with social interactions, leading to social anxiety, and they often feel misunderstood and not accepted in a neurotypical world. Sensory sensitivities. Difficulties with sensory environments can increase stress and anxiety. Monotropic focus. Autistic people may have intense obsessive thinking patterns that contribute to anxiety. Alexithymia. Some people on the autism spectrum have trouble recognizing and expressing emotions, which makes it very hard to identify anxiety. Genetic and environmental factors. Anxiety may share genetic and environmental risk factors with autism itself. Also, higher IQs and greater age in people on the autism spectrum correlate with increased anxiety.
So how would the NT wife, in this case, download some of these things? She might download the mind blindness stuff as, my opinions are not important to him. He's rigid. It has to be his way or the highway. With the alexithymia, she may download, and justifiably so, download that as, he doesn't care about my feelings. And when I tell him how I feel, it doesn't matter. He seems insensitive, selfish, narcissistic, and so on. Some of the executive function deficits, we'll use working memory as an example. If you say something and he said, yeah, I'll do that, or whatever, and he doesn't follow through, it's not that he necessarily lied to you when he said he's going to follow. A lot of times he forgets, but she may download that as, these things that are so important, it doesn't matter to him. He's only concerned with his agenda, his special interest. The other stuff that needs to be done, which there's a bunch, it just doesn't fall in his radar. And with the anxiety, you're going to witness some version of meltdown or shutdown or false agreement, which is he just agrees with whatever you say to hurry up and get you to shut up. Yeah, honey, yeah, sure, right, yeah, I'll do it. And it's not that he's necessarily lying. He's wanting to hurry up and get the conversation over with because he's escalating. With meltdowns, shutdowns, and false agreement, she might view that as, I'm not important. We can't talk about any difficult things. I've given up on trying to talk about the really problematic stuff, the really heavyweight topics, because it always ends in a shit show, and all these problems are just piling up in the closet. None of it's getting resolved. So she, justifiably so, realized this guy's just not a team player at all. He's a solo player that just happens to be married. And it's not just those 4, but those 4 right there, mind blindness, emotions blindness, executive function deficits, anxiety, contribute to a good 80 to 90% of the problems. We could throw in a couple others. As a side note, sensory sensitivities. In the majority of cases, he had his own childhood abuse issues, maybe have been labeled a problem child by parents, problem student by teachers. No doubt at some point, if he has ASD level 1, he was quirky and odd and tried to get acceptance in his peer group. It didn't work. Maybe was rejected, ostracized, teased, bullied. And so he decided, evidently my relational skills suck, and he stopped trying. And that's when he gravitated towards special interests and tasks. So now, as an adult, he has 1 or maybe 2, usually just 1 special interest that he spends an inordinate amount of time with. It's not that he doesn't care, it's just that he can't wrap his brain around things that are laden with social and emotional intricacies because he doesn't have that wiring. Dealing with you, his significant other, where this bond is laden with social and emotional intricacies, he has to be firing on all 8 cylinders. He ain't got 8 cylinders. And you might be thinking, well, I don't understand, because he does fine everywhere else. If his work is his special interest, he's functioning in that workplace literally as a neurotypical. But when he comes home to you, or now, social and emotional nuances are introduced into the equation. He's lost. I'm not saying he's stupid. He's probably smarter than me. But that's his weakness right there. The social skills and emotional literacy are his 2 deficits. And where do you have to have your social skills and emotional literacy up to par more than anything else? With you, his mate. He does well in other venues, does well at work,
Why so good or decently in all these other areas of life, but not with me? That's because you are his significant other, and it involves the highest element of social and emotional intelligence dealing with you. If he's dealing with a coworker, he can have the social and emotional intelligence of a 15-year-old. And he will fly under the radar. Nobody will even know there's a problem. But as soon as you put him in an environment where his social and emotional skills have to be running in tip-top shape, which is when he's dealing with you, that's when he fails. Having a difficult conversation with you about the relationship problems, he's in his weakest moment. And there's a few other things that I could throw in that I'm not going to throw in now, where you are taxing every last ounce of immature skills that he has. So you need to do a paradigm shift in your head. I'm dealing with somebody who's socially, emotionally immature. That doesn't get him off the hook. I don't want you to baby him. And you never, ever hear me say, don't get angry. I don't want you to set up a situation at home, and I know you would never do this, although you may have done this sometimes, where you try to make all of these accommodations and adjustments and walk around on thin ice all day just to not rock the boat. You don't want to live like that for you, of course, but you don't want to live like that for him either. He needs to be held accountable at some level, even if it is a full-blown, unadulterated trait. Traits are no license to go around spraying on your spouse like a skunk all day. And I talked to the guys in the men's group about that. You can work on your traits, or you can continue to suffer the consequences because, and this is what I tell them, there's always a consequence. If you do your little shutdown or meltdown, you think you might be getting off the hook for the moment, but you have just basically made a bad problem worse. You've just postponed it. So I talked to the guys about doing a cost benefits analysis. You can choose the meltdown or shutdown, or you can choose to figure out some other coping strategy for your anxiety, which that's what a shutdown and meltdown is. It's a poor coping strategy for anxiety reduction. So you can run with your old method, or you can try to find some other anxiety reduction method that's not as problematic. But if you choose the meltdown or shutdown, you have by default chosen the mess that you have to clean up after that. And there's always a mess to clean up.
And I'm not trying to get him off the hook. He's very much on the hook with his traits, regardless of whether it's a part of the disorder or not. There's organic consequences for being wired autistically in a neurotypical world, unfortunately. A lot of it's not fair and a lot of it's not right, but it is what it is. And if you've been watching my videos or others, you already know some of these terms and what they mean. I'm going to just grossly oversimplify them. These are the big four that get in the way of this relationship running like you have wanted it to. There's mind blindness. If I have mind blindness, I am not going to understand my NT wife's thinking. I'm not going to understand what's in her mind, why she has certain perspectives and opinions. And if she tells me what her opinion is and why, I'm going to view it most likely as very illogical and that she's being overly emotional. I cannot peel myself out of my skin and crawl into her skin and look out of her eyeballs and know exactly why she has a certain perspective on things. And since which we're calling, that's called empathy. If I can't do that, then I can't even see, emphasis on see, with mind blindness. I can't see her opinion. So in a mind blind brain, her opinion is invalid. And since I can only see my perspective, therefore, I have to be right, because in my autistic brain, only one person can be right. And since I can't see your view, I can only see mine, therefore I'm right and you're wrong. With alexithymia, which is emotions blindness, I'm going to be out of touch with my feelings. I'm going to be out of touch with your feelings. And even if you tell me how you feel, it's not going to make any sense to me. I might think, well, why would you feel that way? And if you tell me, well, I feel this way about such and such, and you expect me to take how you feel and apply it to some course of action I'm supposed to take? No, not going to get that one either. The third one would be executive function deficits, and I'm going to go ahead and put some things in the notes here because there's too many to list right now. I want this to be largely Q&A today. I'm going to dump them in here, and I would like for you to, as soon as I get this document to load, and I would like for you to, not necessarily now, but certainly after the group, to peruse through this list that I will have there in a second, and you will be able to identify, because you know him probably better than anybody else. In fact, I don't think it would be a stretch to say you probably know him better than he knows him. He can't observe, you have the ability to peel yourself out of your mind and step back. This is you. You have the ability to pull consciousness out from here and view yourself as an objective third party. And do a good self-analysis on why you said something or did something or why you're feeling a particular way. You have that ability. He does not. That's why I say you probably know him better than he knows him. These are the executive functions that I put in the notes. They're not the executive function deficits, but you'll be able to make sense of this. I'll use a couple examples. If he doesn't understand your nonverbal communication or your tone of voice or your sarcasm, etc., he would have an abstract thinking deficit. If you have witnessed, which I'm sure you have, some version of a meltdown or shutdown or freeze, fight, flight, freeze, or false agreement, which he just, yeah, sure, whatever you want. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'll do it. Just to hurry up and get the conversation over with because he's short-circuiting. So a meltdown, shutdowns, and all points in between would be emotional control deficit. If he has a problem getting started on a task, a problem multitasking, planning and organizing, if he has a problem shifting focus, in other words, he's hyper-focused on this thing over here, maybe you come along and try to divide his attention and get him to attend to something else, you probably got some pushback there. If he seems to forget a lot, working memory deficit. So that's the third one, mind blindness, emotions blindness, executive function deficits, all of which result in the fourth one, which is chronic low-grade anxiety that has been in place. If he has ASD level 1, it has been in place since childhood. She often says, well, I ask him if he's anxious, and he says, no, he's not. How the hell would he know if he's anxious if it's been operating for the last 35 years? If you're in a dark room for 40 years, somebody comes in and says, hey, why is it so dark in here? What do you mean dark? This is the way it's always been. I don't have anything to compare or contrast with. So if I go around, and I don't know why people think the way they do, why they feel the way they do, and I have memory problems and focusing problems and organization problems and emotional regulation problems and so on, I've got a lot of anxiety. I've got a lot of unpredictability in my life. All day long. What am I going to do if I have just a ton of unpredictability in my life? I'm going to try to create as much predictability as possible for my own sanity. How am I going to do that? I'm going to have a bunch of rules. I'm going to crave structure. I'm going to thrive on routine. I'm going to hate change. And I'm going to really hate surprise change. So those are the four big things that have gotten in the way. We could probably throw in sensory sensitivities if we wanted to, but that's really just a symptom of anxiety, which I've already talked about that. In most cases, it's the sensory sensitivity that causes the anxiety. So we're back to anxiety again. Those would be the big four that look to you, and I'm not faulting you. It's totally understandable why mind blindness would look to you, and you have made a bunch of false accusations. I'm not faulting you. Why wouldn't you? Because if it looks like a dog, smells like a dog, barks like a dog, by God, you're sure it's a dog. But with mind blindness, you may have downloaded that as my opinion is not important to him. He thinks I'm dumb. The emotions blindness, you may have downloaded that as he doesn't care about how I feel, or that he's so insensitive and uncaring, narcissistic. With the executive function deficits, I'll use, I'm just going to pick one. I'll pick the working memory executive function deficit. If he has that, oh, by the way, he won't have all of these, but he'll have more than one. If he has a working memory deficit, you may download that, and why wouldn't you, as the things that I need him to do or want him to do or us to do are not important to him. He can't even remember them. I have to keep repeating over and over and over and over. Obviously, he doesn't give a shit. And with anxiety, and he does some version of a shutdown, you may download that as he doesn't care about the marriage. I'm not important to him. He just left the ball in my court, just took off and talked to me for the rest of the day or 2 or 3 days. But one of the goals of this group would be, and I know the behavior still hurt. I'm not saying, well, you need to just not be upset about it. No. But I would like you to at least begin the process of not taking some of these traits personally. So we already know the what part, what happened. I could probably describe what's happened, even though I've never talked to you before. But on my end, I want to focus more on why it happened so that it will make more sense to you. And if you can begin to take some of these things less personally, it might take some of the sting out of behaviors that you may have downloaded as he's selfish, uncaring, insensitive, narcissistic, sociopathic, etc. How does that look to the NT wife? Mind blindness, she might download that as he doesn't care about my opinions. He doesn't care about my perspective on things, or my viewpoint. He doesn't care about what I think on matters. With respect to emotions blindness, she may download that as he doesn't care about how I feel. No, he didn't see how you feel. He didn't see it. It's not like he saw it and then chose to not give a shit. He didn't see it to begin with. Some of the executive function deficits, we'll just pull one off the thing. Working memory deficit. Well, he never remembers the stuff I want him to do. No. So therefore, he doesn't care about the thing. No. If he has a working memory deficit, it's not that he remembers but just doesn't want to do it. He doesn't remember it. She tries to start a conversation, and maybe she's trying to be very tactful and diplomatic, but he downloads it as criticism somehow. Maybe he's really offended, takes off, shuts down for an hour, 2, 3 or 4 days even sometimes. I've had some reports where he didn't talk to her for a week or more, and then she may download that, justifiably so, as well. We can't work on anything. With the difficult topics just keep piling up in the closet, so I just give up on trying to discuss anything. We can't work on anything. He doesn't care. His work's more important to me, or his computer's more important to me. And it's not that he doesn't care, is that he's hypersensitive, his anxiety escalates quickly, and then he does his version of anxiety reduction, which makes it look as if he doesn't care. Or maybe she has labeled him insensitive, uncaring, selfish, narcissistic, and so on. Again, I'm not faulting her, but you should know better now.
And I got another email from a neurotypical wife regarding her Asperger's husband, and she is wanting to know how she can know the difference between Asperger's traits versus pure, unadulterated insensitivity. So what she's wanting to know is she understands that her husband has special needs and that he's going to have certain traits that are hardwired and are fixed and are going to be difficult to change. And she's wanting to know how she can tell the difference between these traits that come with the disorder, in which case she would need to give him a break, versus him just being purely selfish, uncaring, and insensitive. Well, that's going to be a difficult question to answer because everybody with Asperger's syndrome or high-functioning autism is different, and so the traits manifest differently given the person, and also it varies from situation to situation. But most Asperger's-related behavior, sometimes misinterpreted by the NT spouse or partner as insensitivity, tends to revolve around the Asperger's individual's resistance to any kind of change. So it would be helpful to think in terms of when your husband is like really super resistant to any type of change, that's usually a sign that it's related to an Asperger's trait. So an Asperger's individual is resistant to change for many reasons. For example, he has anxiety about a current or upcoming event. Due to mind blindness, he has a general misunderstanding of how the real world works. He tends to have difficulty understanding the actions and feelings of someone else. And your husband may have some other issues going on. A very prominent one is ADD. He may be resistant to change because he's reluctant to participate in an activity he can't do perfectly or an activity that is too difficult. Most people with Asperger's do have a strong need to control the situation, and they typically have difficulty transitioning to another activity, especially if the current activity is not finished. So any or all of these triggers can result in certain behavioral patterns that look like insensitivity and selfishness. For example, he may argue, he may have an adult tantrum, he may melt down, he may refuse to listen to you, he may pout, and so on. But keep in mind that Asperger's syndrome is a developmental disorder. So developmentally he is challenged, and what I mean by that, his social emotional brain is immature compared to his chronological age. Also, the triggers that I listed, these triggers have more to do with anxiety and rigidity than it does, just wanting to upset you or hurt you. The typical Asperger's brain does not take in what is going on around him. He's not able to read between the lines. He doesn't understand implied directions, doesn't understand social cues, doesn't understand facial expression or body language. And so all of this does kind of give the appearance as if he doesn't care, and in many cases it may give the appearance that he's purposely trying to be hurtful. So uncovering triggers for negative behaviors is very important. It would be good for him to keep a diary, or maybe you could keep the diary noting any events surrounding negative behaviors, the details of his responses, and so on. And this is not to get him off the hook. He's still responsible for his behavior, and having a developmental disorder is not a license to hurt other people. Having said that, people with Asperger's syndrome are often unable to resist giving in to their obsessions and compulsions. Because they have difficulty interpreting social cues, they can come off as being egocentric. It's difficult for them to fully appreciate what impact their behaviors have on others, and due to trouble handling changes in routine, even a simple variation in your husband's schedule or routine may be enough to cause him to have a rage attack or a meltdown or a shutdown. So to summarize, when you're trying to decide the difference between Asperger's related behavior versus pure insensitivity that has nothing to do with the disorder, it would be helpful to think in terms of the fact that he is resistant to change, he prefers routine and predictability, and when that gets disrupted, his behavior that looks like insensitivity is probably mostly related to Asperger's syndrome. With mind blindness, you're not really sure what other people are feeling, what they're thinking, what their motives might be, and so they're always trying to guess what's going on with other people in the social realm. And this is very anxiety provoking. And so that's why they really love routine and predictability, to cut down on the guesswork involved with trying to figure out how people operate. So therefore they're very resistant to change, and they do have some dysfunctional coping mechanisms to deal with their anxiety around change that can look like insensitivity. Hope that answers your question. Thanks, and click on the link below for more information on this topic. Thanks, guys.
I get questions from NT partners, and most often it's the wife, and they're often asked questions in the area of what are some of the traits that I need to know about in my husband or wife, as the case may be, with Asperger's or high functioning autism, that get in the way of relationships. Is there any particular traits that I need to be really aware of? And there are. To help you understand your spouse or partner on the autism spectrum, just know that many of them turn their emotions way down, not off, but way down. And it comes from many years of emotions getting in the way of their logical way of thinking, okay? It's not that they don't have any room for emotions. It's just in their mind there isn't any need for emotions. Many people on the spectrum believe that emotions just get in the way of completing tasks. because they are very task-oriented. They're more interested in things and tasks than they are in people. You could even think of their motto as being, remove the emotions and accomplish the task more efficiently. So why does that cause a problem in the relationship? Because it should be painfully obvious that they're not going to tune into how they feel so much, and they're certainly not going to tune into how you feel. And if you try to tell them, well, I feel this way about that, and this hurt me, or whatever, and you expect him to take how you feel and apply it to a task he's supposed to complete, it's going to be a mismatch. The other thing that occurs oftentimes with people on the autism spectrum is they have challenges in understanding or predicting the consequences of their behavior on others. So they may say or do things that are hurtful. It's not their intention. Of course, I know there's the difference between intention and impact, but they will often say or do something. She will get upset, and he won't know why, but he will view her as being irrational, illogical, and overly emotional. Also keep in mind that since they have mind blindness issues and alexithymia issues, and if you need more information on that, just email me. My email is mbhutten@gmail.com. So since they have the mind blindness and alexithymia stuff going on, they view talking about the relationship problems as almost intolerable. They have a very difficult time hearing your negative emotions because they would view, I'm talking to the NTs here, they would view your different opinion or your attempt to explain a different perspective about a situation as criticism and you trying to start a fight. So when you have tried to explain things to him about a particular issue that you wanted to address, you may have found that you didn't get very far because he felt personally attacked. Another thing that causes problems in relationships that is a trait is to them, to the people on the spectrum, routines are paramount. They find great comfort in routine and structure, and they don't like change, and they will be very stressed out if you try to surprise them or change them in any way. And then the other big thing is they're, as I mentioned earlier, they're more task-oriented rather than relationship-oriented. So their motto is kind of tasks first, relationships second. So if you have often had the thought that my husband with Asperger's, for example, he's more interested in his work or his special interest than me. Those things are more important to him than I am. So if you run into that, then you know what I'm talking about tasks first and relationships second. The other one and the last one that I'll talk about in this video in an attempt to help you to understand your spouse with AS or high-functioning autism is you may have run into a situation where they always have to be right and or they always have to make you wrong. So and actually we're back to the mind blindness thing, so be sure to research that. If you go to adultaspergerschat.com, I have a bunch of information on that. So if I have this disorder called Asperger's or high-functioning autism, this is a developmental disorder, which means that my social emotional brain is underdeveloped relative to my logical brain. And to complicate matters even worse, my logical brain is overly developed, which is a problem because now I can get stuck in analysis. I can get hooked on a thought, and it's hard for me to move from thought to action. So in other words, my social intelligence and my emotional intelligence is low, and my logic is too high. In fact, you could think of high-functioning autism literally as a disorder of social skills, because it takes a lot of social and emotional intelligence to have well-defined social skills, obviously. So as a result of having this low-functioning social emotional brain, I have this thing called mind blindness. In other words, I have a hard time predicting what might be in the mind of my partner or spouse. I have a hard time imagining what they might be thinking or feeling. So I truly have no clue how the other person feels and thinks. So as a result, when they have a perspective or opinion that's different from mine, I can't wrap my brain around their perspective. I can't, in a sense, peel myself out of my body and crawl into her body and look through her eyes and see things through her lens. So if I have this mind blindness, her viewpoint makes utter nonsense to me. So since I'm blind to her perspective, I will tend to view her different opinion as she's disagreeing with me. She's trying to argue with me, which is a thinking error. So I make this thinking error because she is disagreeing with me, therefore she's against me. I make that leap of logic right there. So then I continue with another thinking error. Because she's against me, I have to defend myself and prove that she's wrong and illogical and overly emotional. If I don't make her wrong, that means I'm wrong because only one person can be right. And that must be me, since my perception is the only perception I can see. Emphasis on see, because I have mind blindness and I can't see hers. So in other words, since I can't comprehend her thoughts or feelings, her thoughts and feelings are not valid. Okay? So it's like, think of color blindness perhaps, where I'm colorblind, I have the Asperger's, and I'm colorblind, I only see in shades of gray. And the NT wife, for example, she sees this rich mosaic picture and she's pointing out all the colors. And she says, blue, red, well, look at that pretty turquoise and that. And I'm going, no, that's just all gray. And then we get into this argument because I have my filter and she has her filter. And since I can't see through her eyes and see all the different colors, I just assumed quite honestly that she's just a nutcase and doesn't even know what she's talking about. And I totally invalidate her opinion at that point.
Hey guys, this is Mark, and in this video we're going to look at the prevalence of avoidant personality disorder in people on the autism spectrum. Now, according to many professionals in the autism community, avoidant personality disorder, or APD, manifests itself more frequently in adults on the autism spectrum compared to the general population. Now, reasons for this include the individual may have been rejected as a child. There may be difficulty cultivating friendships throughout the lifespan. Perhaps he was a victim of bullying, teasing, being ostracized from his peer group as a child. Many times there's a difficulty maintaining gainful employment due to social skills. And that usually has more to do with not so much ASD level 1, but ASD levels 2 and 3. Also, there may have been an over-reliance on parents in adulthood, which sometimes referred to as adult-child syndrome. And then in many cases there's learned helplessness, and that is where the adult believes that he or she is fundamentally flawed in some way. Thus, they simply give up and stop trying to connect with others in a meaningful way. Now, even though people on the autism spectrum may have some APD traits, it doesn't necessarily mean they would qualify for the disorder per se. So, according to the American Psychiatric Association Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, an individual diagnosed with APD needs to have at least 4 of these in place. 1, avoids occupational activities that involve significant interpersonal contact because of fear of criticism, disapproval, or rejection. Number 2, the individual is inhibited in new interpersonal situations because of feelings of inadequacy. Number 3, the individual is preoccupied with being criticized or rejected in social situations. And number 4, the individual is unusually reluctant to take personal risks or to engage in any new activities because they may prove embarrassing. Number 5, the individual is unwilling to get involved with people unless they are certain of being liked. Number 6, shows restraint within intimate relationships because of the fear of being shamed or ridiculed. And number 7, tends to view himself or herself as socially inept, personally unappealing, or inferior to others. And so the individual will have to have at least 4 of these. So in summary, the adult on the autism spectrum may feel as if he's frequently unwelcome in social situations, even when that's not the case. And this is because people with APD have a low threshold for criticism and often imagine themselves to be inferior to others. So when in social situations, an individual with APD may be afraid to speak up for fear of saying the wrong thing, blushing, stammering, or otherwise getting embarrassed. And he may also spend a great deal of time anxiously studying those around him for signs of approval or rejection. Hey, this is Mark Hutten. Would you like to schedule a one-on-one Zoom call? Okay, it's so simple. Just look under any of my videos in the description area. Click on this Calendly link. Now you see my calendar. Pick your month, your day, anytime that's available. Enter your name and email address. Then you'll get a follow-up email with the Zoom link on the day and time that you picked. And voila, we will talk.